And I got it. There we go.
Hello, everyone. This is Tripp, and you're listening to Homebrewed Christianity and returning to the podcast after 7 years, Pete. What's up with that?
It's about time. I was wondering, did I say something wrong? Was I too progressive for you?
That's what it was.
Asking too many hard questions that is just too difficult for you, probably. I don't know.
But. Well, that silky smooth voice you hear is Pete Enns. Hebrew Bible scholar, the man behind the microphone, running. Do you or Jared drive the Bible for Normal People podcast? Like, how do you describe your relationship?
I mean, we know each other's limitations and skill sets, and the behind the scenes stuff, Jared does most of that, and we have a staff of people to help. But we contribute, I'd say, pretty equally, with things like posts and whatever like that. So it's fine. I like doing this with somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I think Jared does too. Last time he told me. So I don't know if anything's changed in the last week or two, but
well, you bring the brains and the looks, and he brings the other things,
Well, he brings brains too, not
okay.
looks. He's sort of ugly, don't you think? I mean, I don't know.
We shouldn't talk about him. What if he finds out?
He doesn't have time to listen to podcasts. He's too busy. He's
too
busy running the Bible for Normal People.
Yeah. So. Well, I'm really glad you're here. And before I have a stack of topics we may or may not get to, but before we get in, I want to tell them, you and I have a question we want the world to answer.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. It's a survey. And
a survey. Yeah, very important one. This will change your life, actually, if people take it seriously.
What kind of survey is it?
It's about God.
Yeah, but not just about God. Here's my branding that I was thinking of. Yeah. It's called the Only God-Ordained Survey.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's true. That's true. If we're involved, if the Bible for Normal People is involved, then that's all there is to it.
I've never been God-ordained before, except in my actual ordination. And but
in my real ordination,
this
is
not
the fake one.
Yeah, I did not get like Life Church, where I could do my friend's wedding. This is a real one. But I've never been ordained on the internet. Now I'm talking to one of the co-hosts of the Only Ordained podcast.
True.
And you have just graciously allowed us to have a tag team survey. And here's a question. It's a 1-question survey. So that means everyone can win, right?
Right.
We want to know the biggest question you have about God, theology, and the Bible. And that's it. That's it.
And I hope most people are saying just one.
Yeah, because you could have more than one.
And the thing is, you might have to really, to limit it to one, you might really have to think about it.
Yeah. Narrow
and
it
not just
down.
Go with the first reflex, but really think, no, actually, my real problem is this. It's not that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. What's the purpose of such a survey?
Ooh, that's interesting. That's a good question, Pete. Yeah. Now, I have an idea. What if we were to collect thousands of answers and then make a top 10 list of the biggest God, theology, Bible questions?
Or no, we could do that, or we could publish all of them. We want their names, of course, and send them to their pastors.
Oh, that's even better. If you if you could include the email of their family member praying for your salvation, then we will let them know that that this is the question.
Yeah, right. Okay.
It's not gossip, anyway, it's a prayer request.
But you have a better idea. What's the better idea?
We're going to collect all these questions, and then we are going to get a whole bunch of theologians to answer them. A whole host of different theologians.
That's amazing.
Because you want to know one of the reasons I like you, Pete?
Why?
Because not every person that's brilliant thinks that people should hear answers other than their own. You and I have some friends in the academy that see introduction to whatever their field is as an opportunity to indoctrinate them on one of the really good options.
Right.
But Bible for Normal People, Homebrewed, we like to introduce people to the cacophony, the multiplicity of live options that don't suck.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we want to do. And why not do it with this survey too?
Yeah. So we're going to take the survey
There are
questions.
smart people out there. I don't know. I've noticed this just recently, but there are some really, really smart people out there in the world. I thought I was the only one. Well, you too. But, you know,
okay,
I just
thanks.
Who knows more than I do, but I hope nobody's taking that seriously, because maybe some of your people don't know my sense of humor, but it is rather dry and self-effacing. So I don't actually think I'm the smartest person in the world, and not even close to it. That's why we love having guests on our podcast that will always get us to think about stuff. You know, that's like fun to do that. And you do that. And the world's a big place. And there are a lot of people who have thought very, very deeply about things that, you know, some of us have skimmed the surface on. We know there's an issue there, and we've dug a little bit down, but not as far down as some people have dug. And it's just great to have these people in your life.
And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take those questions. We're going to have a big reveal of the 10 big questions when you and I are hanging out at Theology Beer Camp.
Correct.
And I may or may not have actually talked to a videographer and a local craftsman about building a God box.
Oh,
you remember I told you about the God box? I was not joking. Is now quite a possible thing. Like,
I was afraid of that. Yeah. Okay.
There'll be a box called the God box, and people can go in the God box after when we're having our theological tailgate party at Theology Beer Camp during the cornhole battle. And stuff like that. They can go in the God box, and you get 90 seconds to answer one of the questions. And then when you win, I'm gonna make some T-shirts that said I dominated the God box at Theology Beer Camp.
Oh man.
Yeah.
How can people not want to do that?
I don't know. But if you're one of those,
does the God box have a lock on it? Is it like does it have any air in it, or does it
has
have
air?
Does it have windows or like openings or something? Okay, that's good.
But we're working on one of those mirrors, you know, where you're like talking to a mirror, but there's really a camera in it, like on a reality show on MTV.
Right. We could do a version of like Schrodinger's cat box and just have a pellet released. If people like, is it a good answer or not? We don't know. Let's open the door and find out.
We don't know.
And if they're dead, then it was a really, really bad answer.
So now is this is recruiting a graphic artist to make a funny graphic connecting God box that kind of looks like a real world confessional and Schrodinger's cat. You can figure out how to do that, and then you find out if you come out obviously with the god-ordained answer or heretical trash.
Exactly right. Yeah.
If you want to hang out with us,
this is a win-win.
If you want to hang out with us this fall, Theology Beer Camp, you should come. TheologyBeer.Camp. Did you know that they had .camp web addresses?
I had no idea, no earthly idea. Okay.
Yeah, I bought more than one of them in hopes that I get to run a camp around a whole host of themes later in life, because they were on sale when they first came out. So I just bought a number of them.
Okay.
Well, so sometimes I buy URLs and then seek an event or a class or something
to use them for.
To use them for.
Yeah.
But okay, so now I want to ask you some questions I put on my list of questions.
Oh gosh. All right.
To ask Pete Enns. And the first one, it got added to the top of the list today because on your social media feed, you start posting your new post about how you're rejecting progressive Christianity. You're no longer a progressive. You're not progressive. And I said to myself, did the Holy Ghost touch Pete Enns' soul and realize that it is indeed the holy, inerrant, perfect word of God, infallible in all things? And he's stepping back into like historic, obviously the one true Christian faith. And I haven't actually read more than that one social media post. So I wanted to know how much projection I'm doing.
That's an awful lot of rejection there.
Okay.
So. Actually, in a way, I don't, there are reasons why I don't like progressive. And one of them is that it doesn't go far enough. I think it doesn't really, describe what I think is happening when people's, their conception of God, their understanding of God, of Jesus, the Bible, Christianity, life, the people closest to them, their own souls, when that changes, not like I'm progressing. And maybe that's true. I just think the term has become so radioactive And I mentioned in the post sort of like CRT and Black Lives Matter and woke, though that's very unfortunate that terms have gotten co-opted and just become labels um, for describing things you don't like. But adaptive is something that I think that's more of a functional term than a sort of an evaluative kind of term, because we all adapt, all human beings adapt, all creatures adapt, and our thinking adapts, and that includes our thinking about God. So I like the term better than progressive. And someone say, I don't like the word adaptive. It's like, well, let's talk about how you've adapted at every single stage in your life and how you don't believe now what you believed 20 years ago. And why did that happen? Because you adapted to reality, you adapted to your experiences, you adapted to books that you read or podcasts that you listened to, or some theologian Tripp had on. There's like, I had never thought of that before. And all of a sudden your theology goes kablooey, and then you have to adapt, right? So I think adaptive Christianity is more descriptive of what is actually happening when people, deconstruct, for example.
Well, it's just not as trendy. It's not as trendy adaptive. You're gonna make it popular. People are gonna be like, oh, look at all these new Instagram accounts popping up. All those adaptive accounts.
Well, we'll see. I think, the one thing about progressive is that, it's fine. I don't lose any sleep over it, but it has always sounded to me a little bit. See, Brian McLaren makes the same point. Progressive implies that people don't agree with you, or like regressive. And it's probably a little more complicated than that, because people who are progressive still acknowledge there's a tradition that they want to carry forward.
Yeah.
They're just trying to really adapt it to different times and places. But likewise, I think, except for maybe some of the most extreme conservative people, everyone realizes we're not living in the first century or the Iron Age. And we have to adapt, we change, and our own churches have adapted and changed. And you might have a focus on preserving a tradition, but you realize the reality of the situation. Likewise, progressives I think the best progressives are not saying, we don't care about tradition, man, we're just going to do our own thing. No, they're actually aware of it, but they're struggling with how it fits with their reality. And that's why, if we understood those terms that way, I wouldn't care at all if people said progressive, but it's become such a word that's easily malignable. I think adaptive is less so, in my opinion. That's why I sort of prefer that. And, we'll see if other people agree. If they don't, that's fine.
Can you guess what the response is going to be from your more conservative evangelical friends?
Well, I think adaptive is just another fancy way of saying that you're a liberal and you just want to tickle itching ears and you just want to believe what you want to believe. And you never adapt a faith that's written in stone. You adapt to it. It doesn't adapt to your experience, right? And I think we could both talk for several hours about how that is probably not a realistic understanding of the nature of faith.
Well, if I was a heresy, had a heresy blog, where I had, because obviously the Lord called me to it, to keep track of Pete Enns in the Bible for normal people, to let people know the scary things, to save their grandkids' souls from it, then I would write a post. Adaptive, more like accommodative.
Exactly.
And then be like, Pete Enns wants you to believe that every Christian experiences their relationship with God in their own historical context, shaped by their experience and encounters with the tradition. That's BS. Jesus is in your heart. There's only one Jesus, and he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. No adaptation needed.
Well, there are 4 Jesuses, but that's another issue. We got the gospel.
So. Yeah. Now you're just giving him new material. You're giving the heresy hunter new material.
But already. Here's the thing, Tripp. I do not give, can I say damn on this podcast?
Okay. You have permission.
Thank you. I do not give a damn about what heresy hunters think. I mean, if people who disagree with that are of goodwill, let's say I strongly disagree with you, but where are you coming from? That's a whole different thing. But people who are of ill will, there are other people who are not of ill will, who are looking for language to describe what's actually happening in their evolving let's say, progressing life of faith. And those are the people that I'm really interested in communicating with. The heresy hunters, you will always have them with you, even to the end of the age, I think. So we can't really be too concerned about them. It's just, as long as they don't sign my paycheck, it doesn't matter to me what they say, unless they actually want to have a conversation about it. That's a whole different thing for me.
So you say that something popped in my head about the sign the paycheck thing. I don't know if you have this experience, but a lot of our peers in the academy that are in situations where certain faith statements are expected to be performed and at least publicly assented to, are in a unique kind of pressure, especially when it goes around issues connected to scripture. Now, most people listen to this podcast are probably in denominations that tend to be more clear about those gatekeeping issues, or have left Christianity over it and that kind of thing. How do you see that tension of a scholar who is trying to be honest intellectually and personally in their own faith and having questions, and then how do you then exist in spaces where part of what you're being paid to do, right, is to at least publicly perform an assent to ideas that you may personally have deep confliction with. And I think that it's difficult for those of us that are more progressive or it's already cost us enough in being clear and direct to have a lot of patience for people that it's kind of like Obama being like evolving on same-sex marriage after he got in the White House, because everybody that knew what churches he's been to already knew what he thought. Anyway.
Right. Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I know it's difficult for many, many people I've met in my life, and it's hard to not feel the tension between, your own curious approach to life, where not having answers is just a given. You don't know everything. And I know, Tripp, you've said about how doing theology is about the process of figuring out how to articulate. That's actually an act of faith. That's actually doing theology. And the institutions, whether they're churches or schools, that tend to give people like that the most trouble are those that don't have that same approach, and they're more rooted in, I can only really speak to the American context, or at least this side of the pond, but how the history of American Christianity, which is really very fundamentalist and then evangelical, they're rooted in paradigms of faith that are very pre-modern and reformational, and maybe the Puritans and things like that. And science is sort of like an uneasy partner to talk, like, what do you do with all that stuff? I don't know, don't worry about it, what we know is the Bible's true, and that kind of thing. There is sort of a guardrail, gatekeeping kind of mentality, and I think to find a place to teach or for people to preach that embraces the tradition and is interested in maintaining that, but also understands that we're adapting. Not to get back to that again, but that's a nice place to find, because you can just relax a bit, and you don't have to be right about everything, and you can explore. And not that I don't want to have a commercial here, but I'm very grateful to be teaching at a place like Eastern University. It's a broad spectrum of people. I'm not the most left-wing person at Eastern's campus, but I'm certainly not the most right-wing person. I'm somewhere in that spectrum. And I like the fact that, we have faculty members, they're not in Bible or theology, but we do have faculty members that probably think the earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And we also have faculty members openly advocating for same-sex marriage. And then you have people who, think the Genesis stories are mythological, and others who think that they're more literal. But we're not trying to kill each other, right? And so there is an openness there that I think is a very good thing to maintain. But it is a tension when every solution you come to in your own mind is provisional. every thought you have, everything is metaphorical and incomplete, and we simply cannot fully understand. And then to say, but do you believe these 17 things? What day is today? Yeah, I guess I do today, but I've actually been thinking about stuff, and I'm trying to work on how to re-articulate some of these things, which many people are doing, but
Yeah.
they're not necessarily in the same confessional context.
Mm-hmm. I think part of it, connecting those observations to the adaptive part, is part of it is the anxiety that comes up in more closed accounts of any tradition. It leads people to imagine that truth is linear and that there's a stack of ideas that all hook together. So if we believe the Bible's the holy inerrant word of God, it means we believe this about God, and then Jesus and the atonement and sin and the church and the end and all that kind of stuff. And it's like a string of pearls all through it. And then if you mess with any of it, it's all on the floor. And now we're hopeless. And like, where do we go? Blah, 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 blah. And I think it's understandable that people are anxious if that's how they visualize truth. But it seems much more sense in an adaptive context. If you're thinking adaptively, then it's not so much like what is the string that holds them all together, the final authority of some scripture or creed or whatnot. But I tend to think of it more of like a wheel. And then what is your centering motif for understanding scripture, God's self-testimony in the person of Jesus and the history of Israel, or whatever way. And so for me, it's a Jesus story of God's compassion, that whoever the God is experienced, encountered, and revealed in Jesus. That's the image of God invisible. And then what does that mean for how we understand humanity and all the different kind of doctrines and questions and such? But when you get new data, it doesn't mean you break the wheel, right? Like, because you're centered on something. So then you kind of continually are reformulating or adapting as you get new knowledge, new experience, sometimes new friends. Sometimes you're in lockdown and all of a sudden historic systemic injustices around race are put in front of your face and you have to adjust, or anyway. I think that adaptive model is really helpful, because then it begs a different question, right? Like, not what is the ultimate authority that holds all the pearls together? And then now we're anxious if it breaks, they're all gone. But what is at the very center of your faith that animates your thinking, reflecting, questing, and wrestling? And in that space, I think it's a lot easier when you shift your thinking to something adaptive, to then actually use declarative sentences and say with more content. And that it takes time, I think, for people to, it's kind of like adolescence in a sense. Like, you lose your voice when you think you speak with this linear set final thing. Then you have to find your voice again when you're always functioning with these kind of centering motifs that help you engage scripture and ideas. Anyway, that was what was going through my head when you were talking. No,
and I think the linear motif, metaphor rather, is a very important one. And I'm sure you'd agree, another spatial metaphor is a pyramid, right? That something's foundational and you build stuff on top of it. And the Bible is always at the bottom. Like, well, that's the thing we're set on. That's the word of God. It's like, there's a huge hermeneutical and theological set of problems when you're reading scripture, which is fine. See, that's just it. If you have more of a circle where there's a center point, somebody once used the analogy, I forgot where I read this, but of sort of like, one of those, when you have a dog and you put him on a leash and you sort of like screw that thing into the ground and you sort of tie the dog to it. Imagine the dog sort of on a bungee cord, and like some dogs like travel, seeing how far they can get. Other dogs like stay closer to the center where the food is. Some are like always roaming around. Others are staying more put in some gentle explorations. But the thing is that they have a centering point, right? And the question is, what is that centering point that keeps them being a dog, on the leash in this little life that they're living? And I think, what that centering point is to me, that is a much needed theological conversation that I know a lot of people would benefit from. What is your centering point? And even if you don't know what it is, it's okay to try to explore that with other people. Is there a centering point that you have? What is it? Let's talk about it. And it's easy to say Jesus, but you run into all sorts of questions that come from that, but that's fine. You see, what does it mean for Jesus to be your centering point? What does it mean for God's, self-testimony in scripture? What does self-testimony mean? It doesn't matter it's like we're working on the right thing and not trying to keep that chain intact, where if one part gets loose, the whole chain goes. And hence you have Christian apologetics, which is always trying to fuse those chains back together again.
Well,
I mean, why does it keep happening? Why do people keep having these broken chains? There's a reason for it. It's not because they're faithless and stupid. There's a reason why those things don't work at the end of the day.
I think it's because they haven't listened to every episode of the Bible for Normal People 2 times.
Probably.
Because then it's all worked out, final, fixed, and complete.
Right. And the most complete thing is, we don't really have all the answers to this stuff. So see you next week. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Okay, so here's one of the questions. I made a list of questions. I want to know what you think.
All right, go ahead.
All right. So here's one. Who's the God of the Bible? And I'm asking it broadly because, a lot of people that listen to the podcast talk to nerds all the time. You're actually a professional nerd, despite them probably thinking you're a stand-up comedian with all the high quality material you've been bringing.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, like you professionally study the Hebrew scriptures. Now, theologians have a weird relationship with the Bible. We have our favorite verses, namely the ones that agree with our larger, internally consistent, philosophically polished view of the divine. But if you're just looking at scripture and someone goes, "Well, Pete, who's the God of the Bible?" What are the kinds of questions and things that most people may not have on their radar that go into trying to answer that question?
Oh gosh. Well, okay. The first thing that came to me, what the God of the Bible is. Okay, people, hear me out. Let me say this. Feel free to come back. I don't care. But I think the God of the Bible is the God of the biblical writers and their experiences, and we see with clarity developments in thinking in the Christian canon, but also within the Hebrew Bible itself. It's not a static thing. And the God of the Bible is the God as this God has been experienced in a plurality of ways. And these writings are collected for us by whoever did it. We have some idea, but we don't really know. And so the God of the Bible is one that, you were joking before about theologians taking their favorite passages, but the fact of the matter is that there's a lot there for people to connect with, because our lives are diverse and our lives are changing. And I think the God of the Bible is we find this God in ways that we can actually, I think, connect with more easily than maybe we sometimes give God credit for, because it's all got to fit into a systematic theology of a certain type. But I'm just not a big fan in systematizing the doctrine of God in scripture, because you're always leaving things out. In fact, what you're leaving out is a majority, not the minority of things. Yeah, I think that's what I think.
But what do you so what you mentioned that in scripture you see different authors, the communities and such, their concept of God. I mean, when people use a word, they whatever referent they think it refers to conceptually varies. That's why it's real hard to have a conversation about God, because not everyone has internalized Alfred North Whitehead so much that it's easy to have a real clear and distinct conversation. But if you imagine the different kind of historical periods that the Hebrew scriptures emerge out of, what are those different periods where there are dramatic shifts in the concept of God changing? Right. And again, this is not saying God became something completely different. Just everyone's always working and then adapting from where they are, and God relates to us where we are. So the concept changes, but my concept of you's changed over time, Pete. Yeah. I used to think you were a really nice and fun person. And then before you start recording, you say that one of your a prioris with humans is you just start off assuming that's that. You're like, I don't like them.
It protects me emotionally. That's why I do that.
Well, just think of this as a safe space.
Okay. Getting back to your question.
Yeah.
Okay. So I see, for me, that question is relatively simple to work through, because I see in the Hebrew Bible two stages: before all the crap happened and then after all the crap happened. And the crap is basically the exile. It's the dissolution of the monarchy, which already began in the 8th century, late 8th century, and continues into the 6th century. And I think what we see in the Bible is a lot of nationalism, for one thing, where this is how things ideally are supposed to work. And I think there, again, I want to be careful in saying this because I don't want to make blanket black and white statements here, but if you're looking for the more, let's say, transactional ways of thinking about God, you can find that when national order is at stake, whether that's Leviticus, or some of the prophets, or the books of Samuel and Kings and things like that. I think the exile I think it's the most important moment in the Hebrew Bible, because it's from that the Israelites, this is the theory, and there are reasons for people saying this, but this is when older traditions began to be encoded, or maybe just adapted or added to, or things like that, or other things were written. And that's why you see this dynamic debate even happening within the pages of the Hebrew Bible. Does God is your suffering a result of disobedience to God? Well, it depends on what you read. Job is pretty much adamantly against it, but Deuteronomy and Proverbs seems to be somewhat for it, and I think that it's the exile that I think ultimately broadened the ancient Israelites and the Judahites. It broadened their understanding of God beyond their categories, which resulted in a lot of wrestling. How does God still value us, and still how do we relate to the world? And I think that God and world problem is something that is, and not exclusively so, but it's at least a tipping point happened with the exile. And you have hundreds of years after the exile of Jews. How do we be Jewish in the face of Greco-Roman philosophy, things like that? And then, the Christian story begins likewise as a Jewish story, giving a particular answer to what it means to be Israel as time goes on. So I really think it's when the ideal of a land and a temple and a God and an army and what enemy can withstand us and all this kind of stuff, that eventually gives way, because that didn't happen. In fact, it was a disaster.
It's fascinating how the role of the exile, being this before and after type of experience, shaping the God concept and such, in a sense, the destruction of the temple functions in a similar way in earlier Christianity, or early Christianities, because there's a multiplicity, and then after the destruction of the temple, you get the a reformulation of both Jewish and proto-Christian self-understanding. And I think one of the things about even this moment, especially for Christians and the dominant culture in the West types, the experience of cultural shift and the kind of lessening of Christendom, the recognition of pluralism, all these kinds of things are putting pressure. But for a whole lot of people, going into lockdown and then realizing that even more white evangelicals were down for Trump and such is functioning in a similar way. When I listen to people talk, doing all these different groups in the last 2 years, that the way people narrate their faith and what the kinds of questions they're asking is that I thought there was something semi-ordered. I was a Christian and I'm an American and I'm trying to be a good person and a good family member and neighbor, employee, student or whatnot. And then I go, whoa, what was in that vase? Or, that was a reference to a Jesus saying. Do you see those connections? I know you interact with a lot of listeners, but I feel like that before and after description captures the kind of violence that a lot of people experienced, realizing that what they thought they could have a home in has no place for them. If
Yeah, I mean, make America great again. Let's just say make Christian America great again is very much a monarchic mentality that there are changes that not only changes are coming, but they have come already. We're not. This isn't Christendom is over. We're not really a Christian nation. I think never have been, but you're losing grip on the good old days, and you want to get them back. But we're in a point where if God is not interested in making America great again, what is God interested in? What does the future look like? And so you have like, well, how does God feel about LGBTQ? How does God feel about other religions? All those kinds of questions are really viable because it's like the winds of culture are changing. And again, getting back to your earlier point, some people say, well, you can't accommodate the culture. I'm going to call BS on that because that is the history of thought, is to accommodate to what's happening in your experience in the world around you. As you know, and I like to tell people, we wouldn't have Christianity if people weren't accommodating to changes. If the Jewish narrative was not being accommodated, adapted to a resurrection Jesus faith, where land and Torah and the place of Gentiles and all sorts of things like that are being rethought, you're adapting to a reality in your context. And that's why I think here's what always happens. I think the side that moves forward usually winds up winning sooner or later, but you always have the stragglers who don't want to do this. And I mean, to me, like a great example of this is after the exile. Okay, you can go back, this triumphant return. Not everybody came back. Some of them were very happy staying in Babylon. In fact, Babylon became like the cultural center of Judaism for about 1,000 years. That's where we get the Babylonian Talmud from. People said, actually, no, we're good. Well, you don't believe in God? I mean, no, actually, we do. But we think God can be here too, and we can do our thing. We don't have to be in the land doing what we do. That is such a major about face, at least in what we have written in scripture in terms of what the central importance of land is. These people said, not really. We've been here for X number of years. We got grandkids here. They're in school. I got my bowling buddies over here. We make great beer. It's Babylon. Let's just stay here. And I think that more, again, I don't want to use progressive, but that willingness to rethink what it means to be a person of faith in a particular God, that is always changing. It never stays put. And if we're looking always to stay put, we're going to miss something that maybe God's actually doing something.
Well, I feel like you're just saying the biblical Christianity is adaptive Christianity.
Absolutely.
And so, okay. Now I've got a list of topics, Pete. It's easy for me to get sidetracked when you say things like that, but I want to, here's the next one. The next question I wanted to ask Pete Enns. So should normal people really read the Bible? Now, behind this, you just got to think what giving the Bible to everyone entailed and the outcomes, right? If you got to replay the situation and go, could we have a reformation a different way so that like should normal, I guess they should all listen to the Bible for normal people. And if you're going to read it, you should be intellectually rigorous and all that kind of stuff. But where's the over under on whether it was a good idea or not to just hand it out?
Well, I think that good or bad, it is what it is, right? And I think, sorry, I got some water stuck in my throat here. I don't know. You asked two questions. The first question was, should normal people really read the Bible? And I think for some normal people, I'd say, no, you shouldn't, because it's traumatic for you. So I don't think there should be a should there. Same as going to church for some people. I think sometimes you have to step away. I would ask, why do you want to read it? Some people want to read the Bible because it gives them a sense of intellectual control over others who hasn't been there? What theology student hasn't been there, right? And my hand's going up here. So I understand that temptation to sort of master a text. But for people who are just, the hurting people who are just looking for just language that will help them hold on, I said, you go nuts, read the Bible. Absolutely. I think it depends on who they are. It's the over intellectualizing, I think, of the Bible that ironically is its own problem. And, think what we will of whether, you're critical of evangelicalism or fundamentalism, what they both share is they are intellectual movements. They really are. Even if I don't like their arguments and I don't think they work very well, that doesn't matter. They're intellectual movements because they highlight doctrine. And usually people are taught to read the Bible so you can get your doctrine right. And once you find a clear statement in the Bible, this is a doctrine, like, 2 Timothy, all scriptures God breathed, that kind of stuff, now you have the doctrine down. So for people like that, maybe reading the Bible is not the most productive thing because it just gives you a false sense of certainty. So I guess it just depends on who's doing the reading, But it's nice, was the Reformation a mistake? I think they said some things that needed to be said. It wasn't a cheery time in the history of the church. And I think in that debate, Luther specifically and Sola Scriptura, in that debate, that's a good corrective. But when it becomes the principle upon which all things are based, it was a good weapon for a battle, but it might not be a good tactic for continuing on in faith. And how many Christians do we know, Tripp, now who are raised that way and thinking, I just have to put the Bible in its place. It doesn't have that central point anymore. The love I experience in the community is very important to me. My intuitions and my experiences are very important to me and how I think about God. And, maybe we're sort of circling back to a place where we can appreciate what the Reformation was doing, but to make it, like, literally for many people, the clearest point where God has spoken in the history of the church. And it's all shaped on knowing your Bible. I don't know. I find that very myopic, actually, and thinking about the nature of faith.
Well, that's sad because I was a sword drill champion. I memorized a lot of Bible verses. Yeah. So I'm sure you agree, nothing teaches rigorous discipleship to the way of Jesus like rote memorization of Bible verses using a militaristic image for you to outcompete your friends and shame them publicly in front of the congregation.
And to beat your friend.
Yeah, you just
because of your knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You got sword drilled.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's a rule violation in most youth groups, but yeah, who knows? So are you a Tolkien fan?
I can't say that I'm a fan, even though, I love the Lord of the Rings, but I mean, a fan to me is, there are people who know Tolkien.
Oh, I understand.
Like, I can't occupy the same space as you.
Which
one's Bilbo? Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Ow, that's not nice, Pete. But I'm very into Tolkien. I'm currently bringing it up enough in hopes that Amazon says I should do the official podcast about each new episode of the show.
Okay.
I'm volunteering on the internet, but no, I recently reread Lord of the Rings, and there's this line I'd never noticed before that I underlined it, and I was like, oh, this is a high quality thing to use when talking about what not to do with scripture. And so I was going to, so Gandalf, and he's talking with Saruman about his staff and breaking it, trying to figure out how the magic works and all this kind of thing. And Gandalf says, he that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. And I think a lot of times that it's not that there's wisdom in that to be gained by engaging scripture and such. It's that our framework of how you get at truth in something is that. Like, I mean, Saruman breaking things, like messing with the origin of all the orcs and all that kind of stuff, to the figuring out how to get the power and all this kind of thing, is that kind of mastery, technological, scientific mastery of a thing. And so many of the questions people will ask you and me when it goes to scripture are basically like, those things you learned in the historical critical study of the Bible class. Does that mean I can't read anymore? Is it ruined? And that's why I really like that the quote is the what is criticism isn't the recognition that there's wisdom to be gained. It's that he that break a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom. And I wonder if that's not part of our task in engaging scripture again, kind of on the other side of.
I think that's a good point. Let me put a little kind of different dimension in it. I think what we're trying to break open is God. I think the Bible can be broken open as long as you don't equate scripture with God, which, okay, nobody does. Yeah, but people do it all the time. I know of hymns that are hymns to the Bible,
Really?
Oh, yeah. I won't say who wrote them, but he's no longer with us, but he was a very well-known Reformed Calvinist pastor. But anyway, I think it's the equating of calling the Bible the Word of God, which I'm actually fine with, as long as we don't like go crazy with the idea, right? But the Bible is God speaking. It's consistent. It doesn't have any errors, and that's the way it is. But if we look to the Bible more from a Jewish point of view, again, generally speaking, a willingness to interrogate the text, to argue with it, to realize that in doing that, you're actually communing with God. To me, those are very valuable things. So to interrogate the Bible is not to lose faith in God or to say I'm interrogating God, or maybe you are, but I think primarily it's a way of getting at the larger question of what God is like. And when you equate scripture with God functionally, you're not going to be able to do that. And you're going to ask questions like, I just had this historical critical thing. Can I read my Bible ever again? Well, why wouldn't you? Well, because it's ruined for me. Why is it ruined for you when you found out that, maybe Moses was a composite figure, or maybe didn't live, or maybe Abraham didn't, or the Exodus didn't happen the way you thought, or maybe David was sort of a jerk and things like that. Why does that bother you? That's a question worth reflecting on deeply. Why does that bother you?
One of the things that the why there, when I've encountered people in that situation, I luckily didn't grow up in the kind of context where you had the Bible function that way. But I'm always shocked that people will give me personal testimonies to having encountered God in Christ. And then they're like, JEDP, is any of it true? And I want to go like, you just told me about your actual encounter with the divine, right? So hypothetically speaking, it animated your life. You are a more loving person, attentive to your neighbors in way, like you've come to own like your frail, like you go through this, like whatever had to be true for you to encounter God has obviously happened because you just told me the most true thing I've experienced, and then they're like, but the JEDP, or can you believe David was really a rapist? And you're like, well, it was in there. I don't know why that story got in certain children's Bibles, but I do think that that kind of when the Bible functions as a single voice at that foundation of the pyramid, like you mentioned earlier, it means that people don't actually trust that the living and life-giving God that Israel testifies to repeatedly, that they've encountered, it can be trusted to continue to encounter them, unless, wherever they happen to be born, in what family and what church, account of the scriptures is true.
Yeah, and maybe thinking of scripture as that which bears witness to our the I wouldn't say our ability to, but the truthfulness of God being encounterable, however that happens, right? And the Bible is maybe this isn't the best language, but I've used it elsewhere. The Bible is more like a means of grace, like other things can be too, to bring us into that intimacy. And people read the Bible that way, and they reflect on it. And that's really important. Some of us, because we're Western people, are interested in historical questions. And you find out, well, maybe it isn't this simple what's going on in the Gospels. Maybe this is something that's invented by a gospel writer to make a theological point. But why does that have to be automatically something that undermines the experiences that we've had? Right. And I guess, and I know the response to that is, well, the experiences have to be rooted in truth. And we can get into what truth means, but if it has to be rooted in the Bible, and you're expecting it to be this monolithic deposit of truth, you really can't get out of the second chapter of Genesis without questioning that, because you got two creation stories that don't align very well. They don't align at all, really. So it's like, it's almost, I play this little mind game with my students sometimes about how, early on there was no Bible, and then some Jews said, "Oh Lord, we'd like to have this. We want this all in writing, right?" And God says that's not a good idea. No, it would be a great idea, because remember, but it's a bad idea, because you might actually think that you can substitute me for it, and I really don't want that to happen. No, we really want a Bible. Okay, fine, have a Bible, but here's what's going to happen. I'm going to have it so self-contradictory, you'll never get the wrong impression that this is actually giving you absolute truth, that you're being invited to engage something and wrestle with. And I'm going to have two creation stories with a magic tree in the middle of it and a talking snake. Let's just start with that. So there's no way you're going to take this as literal truth. It's going to be pointing you to something else. And we're going to have different accounts of Israel's history. We're going to have 4 gospels. You don't know what that is yet, because you're still Old Testament people, but eventually we're going to have 4 gospels, and we're going to have this guy Paul, who's like all over the place on some stuff, So I think the Bible, when we take into account how it behaves, its characteristics, maybe to echo Karl Barth a bit, it does become God's word to you as you encounter it. It's not something it has by virtue of its inerrant nature, right? And I know that will make some people go ballistic, and I understand why. But some of us have come to that conclusion, not because we just feel like being trendy. It's because nothing else makes much sense to us as we read this, and we try to take seriously the character of Scripture itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, to me, the Word of God happens, and Christians trust the story of Jesus, the history of Israel, as a place where it happens, and that the content there is something worth wrestling with. But I mean, God can take up anything. I mean, well, this is one of the perks of saying there's one God that's good, that made the world, is that God can take up anything and it become an event of the Word. Mm-hmm. If you ask people stories, there are plenty of times friends and their voice and presence and hugs become the Word of God. There's plenty of times art can do it. You can be in nature and do it. There's so many places where the Word of God happens. And to me, it seems that the need to put it in quarantine is stifling for a lot of reasons. But okay, so I have a lot of fun questions about Pete.
Can I say one last thing about that?
Oh,
very briefly. Thomas Merton, Seeds of Contemplation, talks about spontaneous contemplative experiences, which has been a lot of my life the past few years. Just like literally taking a walk and something just hits you, right? It's not chained. It's like you said, like it can be a hug, it can be a breeze, literally a breeze, or the way the sun shines through the clouds. You can explain that scientifically, but it can be an entry point, right? And the Bible has been a huge entry point. It's also been a big problem. But if you think about the entry point being sometimes a place of struggle and debate and getting clarification, the Bible is really pretty wonderful in that respect. It does a good job of doing that. But anyway, go ahead.
No, well, one of the questions is, what's a powerful personal experience that's demanded continual reflection and wrestling for you and your faith? Like one that the experience has mattered and lingered, but how you understand it has shifted in such over time.
Oh gosh.
I mean, I skipped to the end of my like 10 fun personal
I know
questions because you just volunteered that you have you're like, well, Thomas Merton, those.
I didn't say I am Thomas Merton. I said I understand that.
That's
but
good,
I've had,
because I don't want the CIA to kill you.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to repeat it here because it takes too long, but I do relay one story in the Sin of Certainty involving just a an awareness of God's presence. I like the word presence. You said, that's where I experience the word of God. Another way of saying that for me is like divine presence, where it seeped into me, and I still remember that. And this is like 12 years ago. Recently I had, an experience of God's presence when I was just sort of walking around muttering to myself, and all of a sudden I had a real moment of clarity where I don't say this often because it happens like 5 times in my entire life. I'm not one of these people like every day is God talking to me. It's just, I wasn't even talking to him. I wasn't talking to anybody. I was just going on my own. And all of a sudden something hit me again. To talk about it would take an hour to set up, but it's like, yeah, that's right. And I didn't see that. And that's completely right. And you feel like you've been touched in a sense. You don't feel, you're not the same that you were before. And to quantify that and qualify that, to me, is, I really don't like to do that, because I'm trying to control the experience at that point. So I've had a few of those. Yeah. So I wish I could say more, but you probably want the juicy tidbits, but it's not going to happen.
Oh, well, they can get those juicy tidbits when they read your new book.
Perhaps, yeah. Or you and I having a few beers in October.
Oh, yeah. If you want the juicy tidbits,
yeah,
then you gotta go to TheologyBeer.Camp. Okay. Was there
I want Theology Scotch Camp. If we can do that, that'd be great too.
Yeah. Well, that will be present. It's just not included in the purchase of your ticket. Gotcha. Because it's too expensive to buy. This scotch I drink, now that I've been in Scotland for 3 years, is not the kind that you include in ticket prices. So the beer camp, you get a bunch of tokens, and you can get your different, you can get there'll be a whole bunch of different craft beers. You could get seltzers or cider or sodas, things that are like lower in alcohol. Yeah. But there is a secret area. What is your
scotch, briefly? I don't want to keep you here, but this is interesting to me. What's your scotch?
I have I became a member of the Scotch Whiskey Society in Edinburgh. So they get all these different barrels from all the different things, and then they get them. So I don't like the super duper peaty ones, but with just a little peat. And then my favorite one that when we went and visited it was Ben Nevis. Oh, and it's one you can't get it elsewhere.
You can't get in America. Yeah.
No, but I actually bought a bottle last week. Last time I'm probably get to go there while we live here to bring to beer camp. So, so if you're smart and you're at Theology Beer Camp, you just wait until you see me pull out my scotch collection, and then you go to Pete Enns, and that's when you get the juicy bits.
That's when we start talking real theology.
Yeah,
when our inhibitions are gone, when we're not trying to control ultimate reality in our brains, and just like, man, I don't know, but I love you so much. It's fantastic.
I love you, man. So was there a mentor or a class in your time as a student that rocked your world, and you keep going back to and going like, I wasn't the same person after that class, or like this person?
Yeah, I mean, probably. I had a few of those, but most recently, I probably have to say, graduate school. James Kugel and John Levinson both were very influential to me, both Jewish scholars. And I'd say the issue was how thoroughly Jewish the New Testament writers were as they engaged their scriptural tradition. So the whole issue of midrash, really, and that made me just realize, my goodness gracious, why didn't anybody tell me this? It's so obvious. They're not they're not just looking at the Old Testament, they have a whole tradition that they're reflecting on, and it made it just so much deeper and meatier. So that's a big thing. That's been sort of a leitmotif of my life.
Is there, what's your favorite class or particular text to get to teach? Like when you look at your upcoming year, is there a class where you're like, oh, I love getting to do this class for this reason? Or you look at the syllabus and you see a particular text on it, you're like, oh, junk, P.D. Enns is bringing this hype.
Well, I mean, that I teach, yeah, I think I teach a class on hermeneutics, which is a 200 level undergraduate course, and it's basically a brief overview of the entire history of interpretation. And the point is, you see, guys, people have read this text differently than what we're used to, and you know what? There's a lot of wisdom here, and it might make us more open to conversations with others we disagree with, because there are reasons why Origen did what Origen did, and then Calvin did what Calvin did. I mean, even though Calvin hated Origen and allegory, still let's think of why they were saying what they were saying and what the context is. Now, what's your context? That kind of stuff. I like teaching. I'm teaching a course on Genesis this fall. I love teaching Genesis because there's just so much to talk about, and it's sort of a gift that keeps on giving. And I like wisdom literature too. Especially Ecclesiastes and Job. I like talking about those books because they're so counterintuitive, I think, to what many Christians think good Bible writers should be saying.
Yeah, it happens. But so, what about a book that is your favorite to read with undergrad students? Is there one that you go, oh, that's a lot of fun?
Well, I mean, there are, maybe I can mention two. One is Tom Wright wrote a book called The Original Jesus, which came out in the 90s, which I think is out of print, but I make my students get it on Amazon or whatever. And it's a BBC special that he did. It's got tons of pictures in it. That's why I have them read it. And the point is that Jesus isn't about your personal salvation. Jesus is building a kingdom that has political implications. And I think, to me, I like that because I like seeing the students. These are first-year students going, oh, I never knew this before. So that's fun. And I mentioned James Krugel, but he has this wonderful book, How to Read the Bible, which is, in my opinion, the best introduction to the Bible in the modern period for people who are interested in it's all Hebrew Bible, obviously, but for people who are interested in historical criticism, but also the conversation between historical criticism and traditional ways of reading the Bible. So, and I use that in a couple of my classes, and I think it's again really eye-opening for students to see a non-Christian dealing with the same issues that they're dealing with.
Yeah. And then, like, what percentage of them go, can I just be Jewish? It seems like they figured out how to sidestep some of the baggage here a little easier.
Well, they realize that Christianity allows for that though too, and that's the thing too, that it's, and I really advocate allowing our Judaism to our Jewish heritage, which is not immediate, it's distant, but allowing that to inform how we understand the text, which is part of, much of the history of Christianity with the fourfold method of interpretation or threefold or whatever. It's really just the Reformation that unfortunately put an end to that. But I think people are rediscovering that now too.
All right. Two more. One.
All right.
Okay. So let's imagine Pete Enns was Pope for a day.
Okay.
But not just
I do that all the time though, by the way. So go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. This is easy. Well, you're going to nail this one. But your daily task was revamping Vacation Bible School.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
And it takes a lot to really get a whole encyclical out. So the encyclical that was half written on your day as Pope was one considering replacing John 3:16 as the most memorized text for the summer. And you could pick any text in the whole Bible, and because you're obviously a pope and you've got an encyclical almost done.
Mhm.
All the little kiddies are going to memorize it. So like in 15 years, there will be people coming into your intro classes. And when they're like, hey, we're going to talk about the Bible, this is the one that all of them know. All of them know. They're just like, obviously, this is what the Bible is about. It's
yeah. Okay. So I probably would like a lot of time to think about that, because this is for kids apparently, and I don't think the Bible is a book for kids to begin with.
but you're only pope for a day. It's already half written encyclical. You got to follow the game here, Pete.
That's true. That's you set it up very well, very cleverly. So I would say 1 John 4, I forgot what verse, it's around 13, 14, 15 somewhere, but no one has ever seen God. But if we love one another, then God is in our midst, however that passage ends. And I think that that sets you up for saying you're not going to have this direct apprehension of God, but the way you see God is how you treat other people. Right. And to me, that's something worth pondering on. And it's a quote favorite passage of mine too, because it gets me thinking.
Oh, that's quality. That's quality answer.
I don't know how a 5-year-old would respond to that.
It doesn't matter. They're just memorizing it.
The conquest of Canaan. You could be doing that too in Vacation Bible School or something.
You're like, look, God is love, but no one's seen God. But if you love one another, and then they're like, yeah, that seems boring. Who wants to march around and take the walls down and slaughter them? That way it gets us prepared for the Jericho March on January 5th. Okay, so if your library is behind you, for those of you that listening to a podcast, they don't know this. But this is the last question. When you turn around and look at the library and you're scanning the books, like what, and I mean, maybe not everyone has this, but when I scan my library and look at the books, I have my memories of the books pop up. And I'm like, oh yeah, it was that idea and that kind of there. But if you were going to, and I think it'd be fun for you to do this, if you're going to turn around and grab the 3 books that your grandkids read and go, these really mattered to Grandpa Pete. What 3 books, like, when they're nerdy, like they're home one summer from college and they find your library and they're looking it over. What 3 books would you pick up? Like, oh, these changed my mind. These are inspirational. Like, they get me if they get this book.
Oh gosh. I'm tempted to say just my books, but I won't do that.
Yeah, you can't say that. That's
you literally,
because your grandkids already are going to read your books. Might listen to the audio version.
Okay. So I think the one book is how to read the Bible, which is Kugel's book. Another one is, I'm just looking here. That's an unfair question to ask me right
Pete is staring at his library.
I'm looking at all these books. I was like, I can't.
I know.
Pick.
Well,
because it changes over time. That's just it.
Okay. If you die today.
Okay. If I die right this second.
Look, if I have, I thought I was narrowing it enough that you weren't going to play your.
It's sort of like, who's your favorite theologian? Are you kidding me? That just depends on what mood I'm in when I wake up in the morning. I can't possibly do this. This is not, I don't appreciate this at all. Hold on.
Books that you read when you had to change your mind when you read them. What about that? So,
okay. Well, recently, I didn't change my mind. It just expanded. Things expand.
What if it made you adapt in a limber way?
Okay. Okay, well, recently, I would say, for example, How God Acts by Dennis Edwards, who's a Catholic theologian, which I stumbled upon it and I said, this guy's making so much sense about how to think about evolution and stuff. So, and because, the interaction of science and faith, which I look at in my own little area, and how to make sense of that. I know you do that in a more theological area, but it's like I'm looking for things to change how I think about stuff. And now I forgot the name of the book, but a book that I read just 5 years ago by Ben Summer on his understanding of the nature of inspiration in Judaism. And he has an understanding of participatory revelation. And I forgot the name of the book.
It's Ben Summer?
Yeah. Sommer. Ben Summer. It came out about 5 years ago. And are you looking it up?
I am. Is it UM or OM?
Benjamin, SOMMER, Benjamin. Yeah. I'm sorry, Ben, if you for some reason are listening to this goy
the bodies of God and the ancient Israel, Revelation and Authority, Sinai and the
Revelation
Jewish...
and Authority. That's it. Revelation and Authority. Yeah, that's a really good book because he explains from a Jewish point of view what I've been trying to say and others say from a Christian point of view, just taking into account the multiplicity, the multivalence of Scripture. And he says, like he's a very critical thinker, but he'll say like God reveals God's self on Mount Sinai.
Mhm.
But we have different legal codes, but because the revelation has to be interpreted. In other words, there isn't a revelation without the contextual not reinterpretation, just interpretation of it. So there's a sound, there's thunder, that's the revelation, but that has to be interpreted, which accounts for why Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy contradict themselves. And even within Leviticus, you have contradictions, right? So to me, that was like, okay, this is language to get around explaining. Let's use the language of revelation and authority. This is the way to get at that. So I thought that was really fascinating. So
I agree. I like it, Pete, almost as much as I like you.
Okay, good.
But
that's good. But you like me. That means everything.
I know that you woke up today saying, I have a personal deficit deep in my being. And what's going to really help is if Tripp tells me he likes me at the end of our conversation.
And I was just so nervous about coming onto this podcast because I didn't know what you would say. We don't script this, right? We don't know what's going to happen.
No. And your assistant emailed me asking what I was going to ask you about. And I was like, I have a list of questions, but if I tell him, I'm probably not going to ask those.
No. And if you were to give the list of questions, I wouldn't have looked at it because I hate that. I just would rather just talk instead of thinking of answers. But I think I asked her, can you just email Tripp and says, what are we doing? Is it just generally talking, which is fine? Or is there a specific topic he wants to talk about?
Well,
but it doesn't matter. We're good.
But people, you got to say something about your upcoming book.
Oh yeah.
Because it has started after I read it, but it's not coming out yet. So I feel like I've strategically avoided any of the topics in it, which, there are quite a few topics in it I'm really into.
I know. That's why I
have a servant's heart that I waited to talk about those until they could actually buy it.
Right. Well, it's not, I mean, it's, I don't know when this is coming out, but I don't think the book will probably be out until the earliest, like very early 23. Let's say between January and March.
Pete, this is coming out soon because we're getting people to go to the only god-ordained survey.com.
This can come out in
survey so they can come with TheologyBeer.Camp.
That's true. So anyway, I should.
Oh, it's going to come out like in a week.
Okay, it's going to come out in a week, but it won't.
Yeah. You know what I do? I put 2 or 3 episodes out a week, and I do not edit and polish them like the Bible for normal people. Yeah, look, that's not my style. Plus,
you think we polish them?
Yes, you do. I know because I recorded our conversation and know what you decided.
We had to polish you, but generally we don't polish people because
you don't polish yourself because you'll hardly talk.
I know
it creeped me out. I've been on a lot of homebrewed episodes, and I realize I talk about 40% of the time, and if I like them, 50.
Right.
And if I don't like them, 20.
That's your style.
And I thought when I said yes, I was hanging out with you and Jared.
Right. I know. That's true.
And then y'all are just like, short question.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on.
Listen, we all have different approaches to this podcast thing. Ours is ordained, yours is not. Yeah. But just so you know, but if
that's because we didn't turn in our papers. I'm working on it. When I grow up, Pete, I'm gonna be like you. That's what I'm gonna do.
Okay. That's a downside.
I have to cultivate a priori distrust towards the human species that are made in the image of God, because you told me you don't start out liking humans. I just think that the God who is love, like if you put your Bible verse in VBS, people would be like, God's a mystery, but the source of all things is love. Right. And you might like people more.
And that will suck when you're like 12, but when you're like 45, it's like, oh, okay, thank you.
You're like, thank you, Pope Pete, for the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well.
All righty. Well, I hope you all head over to the only god-ordained survey.com. Give us your question. And then if you've listened all the way to the end, and you decide to come to Theology Beer Camp, here is an essential task for you: to bring Pete your favorite scotch. If you bring Pete a bottle of your favorite scotch to Theology Beer Camp, then I'll pull out from not the for everyone, but for Tripp and his friends, really nice cigars, like Cubans, really nice ones. I'll pull those out, and you can have those cigars while you share your scotch with Pete, so you can hear those little emotional bits that he didn't want to share to the masses.
What I really think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All the secrets come out, but they don't come out if they don't bring you scotch. Do you have a favorite scotch you want them to bring you?
Well, I mean, I'm somewhat limited, but I do like Macallan. I just think it's very smooth. And one day I'll be able to afford the real expensive version, but I usually get a 12. So yeah, but I like Macallan.
All righty.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, you heard it here first. Get better than the 12, and Pete's your best friend.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. He'll even follow you on Instagram and like pictures of your dog.
I will. Yeah. Absolutely.